Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, we will be breaking down the Buffalo Bills roster position by position heading into the 2024 offseason. Whose contracts are up? Who are the cut candidates? Who are the extension candidates? What are our biggest needs as a football team? All of these questions will be answered. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour Buffalo Bills show. I almost said pregame show because I'm still in the season mood. Presented by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. Joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on X at the Bills Guys and Dave on X at Tilt Money. And I'll tell you what, Dave, before we even get into the Super Bowl, people are already asking you about your new background. Jared K coming in saying, you got that neon on Temu? I got one. So talk to the people about your new background here.
Yeah, I changed locations of my home office here at home, and you don't even want to know how much time I spent trying to get this lighting right. It's like, let's just say this is not the final product, okay? I'll give you guys like a little bit of an idea of what I got dealing with here, right? If I turn this on, you're gonna see this mad flickering, and I'm trying to get rid of that. So I'm not gonna leave that on for you the whole time. I know I gotta like adjust my shutter and different things, but for now, it's gonna be a little bit of a trial and error for all of you guys, and hopefully over the next couple shows or so, I'll get it kind of fine-tuned to work it out for you.
I'll tell you what, the people listening on Apple Podcasts or on Google Podcasts or on Spotify, just fast forward through the first 30 seconds or so, just so everyone's aware, we are available in podcast format. If you're ever too busy to watch us on YouTube, you can hit us up on all major podcasting platforms. Got to get that little plug in there because we got to get more listens on the audio end. So if you know anyone who doesn't like to watch YouTube but likes to listen to things in podcast form, tell them about the Air Raid Hour. Tell them to search Air Raid Buffalo on their podcasting apps. And we've got a couple other comments coming in. Cecil says, let's go, fellas. Shorter going to shock some people next season. We're going to talk a little bit about wide receivers tonight and what the Buffalo Bills have on the roster, what we don't have on the roster. I don't think Cecil's going to like my commentary in regards to Justin Shorter, but maybe Dave, you have something that might be more in line with what Cecil likes. We got Brian Freedom coming in saying, love your show. Thank you, Brian. We appreciate that. And RJ Melville coming in saying, we are living in the worst timeline. And he is, of course, referring to the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs are once again Super Bowl champions. It can officially be called a dynasty now, right? Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, they've got 3 rings now, and the 2024 offseason has officially begun. How are you coping this morning, or this evening, I should say, the day after, Dave?
It just felt inevitable to me last night that the Chiefs were going to come back and win. I mean, you saw the stats at halftime. Patrick Mahomes 8-2 and trailing by 7+ points. The 49ers really, and I tweeted it like during the game, it was like typical Kyle Shanahan, just like not sticking with the run when he has the lead. And like, it's now a trend for him too, as a coach on the other side. But you never felt like the 49ers were comfortable with that lead they had. And of course it disappeared. And then the whole sort of conversation around, should they have taken the ball in overtime or not? And the argument around that and which they should have done. And so at the end of the day, the Chiefs ended up just making more plays when they had to make the plays, and, give the Chiefs credit. The 49ers went down on that first possession overtime. They had to settle for 3, and the Chiefs came back and answered for that touchdown. It really kind of felt to me a lot like some of the games we've seen the Bills play, where they've had to go down and settle for 3, and the other team just comes back and either wins it. The Philadelphia game comes to mind specifically. So, I mean, what can you say?
I'll tell you what, that was an interesting narrative after the game, listening to the commentary about the decisions that were made in the overtime period. A lot of the
Mm,
Kansas City Chiefs players were ripping on the 49ers for taking the ball, and questions were asked on both sides, and the Chiefs were like, "Hey, we've been preparing for playoff overtime since training camp. Like, they
mhm.
brought the new rules to us during training camp. We talked about it in training camp. We've been preparing for hundreds of days for this moment and for this possibility." And there were 49ers players who were learning the rules of overtime off the Jumbotron in the Las Vegas Raiders stadium. Like, that's Allegiant Field. Like, that's not a good look if you're Kyle Shanahan. And there's always this conversation around Shanahan and McDermott because they were hired in the same year. They
Yep.
were both hired in the same cycle. And Kyle Shanahan has technically had more success than Sean McDermott in terms of reaching the big game. He's reached it twice now. He's obviously the offensive guru, and Sean McDermott is the defensive guru. But I think there might be something to say that there's more to being a head coach than just being able to call really good offensive plays. And Kyle Shanahan might be exhibit A of that.
Yeah, and I mean, this goes back to even his days as offensive coordinator with the Falcons, right?
Mhm.
When he was coordinating that offense in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, and they sort of inexcusably abandoned the run in that game. Now you've seen it twice where they've given up 10-point leads, both against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And I think Kyle Shanahan a lot of times gets a pass, I believe. And Aaron Quinn's been very vocal about this as well on the Cover One group chat. He gets a pass a lot of times, I think, because he's the offensive minded guy and that
Mhm.
he's the son of Mike Shanahan, and he's got this sort of lineage that he's sort of been a part of, and Sean McDermott doesn't really have that family lineage as well. So equally, right? Yes, he's made the Super Bowl twice, but in the biggest
Mhm.
moments, it seems like Kyle Shanahan's faced some of the same despair that Sean McDermott has, right, in his biggest moments. So a little bit of a parallel there.
Yeah, we got Claude Puig coming in saying Josh Allen is the closest to being the Chiefs, period. Kyle Shanahan is a terrible game to coach. And I want to sort of take a look at this Super Bowl from the Bills' perspective, because obviously this is a Buffalo Bills podcast. And
Mhm.
Matt Perino typed out a statistic last night on Twitter that really sort of like just shook me when I read the statistic. And the statistic was that the Kansas City Chiefs combined to allow the Miami Dolphins, the Baltimore Ravens, and the San Francisco 49ers combined, 4
Mm,
touchdowns were scored on that Kansas City Chiefs defense. Steve Spagnuolo, we'll talk about him in a little bit. Effing fantastic, right? Might be the best
mhm.
defensive coordinator of all time with the accolades that he has in the postseason. 4 touchdowns combined were scored in those 3 games. Against Josh Allen, Josh Allen scored 3, put up 3 touchdowns against that Kansas City Chiefs defense. So the issue in Buffalo is clearly not the quarterback. We saw with 13 seconds leaving the field with a lead. Josh Allen is probably the closest thing in the National Football League to being able to dethrone Patrick Mahomes. What's it going to take for the rest of the Buffalo Bills to catch up and dethrone these Chiefs?
Yeah, and just I'll just address this for the people who weren't aware. Like,
Mhm.
and I mean, there were a lot of people making a similar comment. It's because they changed the rules, right? In the
Yeah.
touchdown first now no longer is the clincher in the
Yeah.
playoffs, right? In the regular season, it is. In the playoffs, it's not. So each team guaranteed
Mhm.
at least one possession. But look, I mean, I feel like a lot of people have their opinions of Pat Moran on social media, right? And I like Pat. I feel like he's kind of the personification of a lot of Bills fans, right? A lot of emotion, but he does have
Mhm.
a lot of good, a good reason behind a lot of the things he says. And he put it very bluntly, right? The superstars of the Chiefs have shown up repeatedly in the biggest games in the playoffs and notably the Super Bowl, right?
Mhm.
The biggest stars of the Bills outside of Josh Allen have not
Mhm.
done that, right? Consistently in the playoffs against, when it comes to the biggest games, right? And Stephon Diggs is part of that. The defense obviously is part of that. You brought in guys who could step up in the biggest moments of the biggest games. Brandon Beane swung for Von Miller 2 seasons ago because he'd been a closer his entire career and notably in the postseason. And
Mhm.
that was the guy that you envisioned being your version of Chris Jones, being your version of that superstar that would show up in the biggest moments of the biggest games because he's got the track record and he's done that.
Mhm.
but the Bills just haven't gotten that level of production this year in the playoff game. Maybe it was Ed Oliver who kind of like faded a bit, but they just haven't gotten it from guys outside of Josh Allen in the biggest moments. And I think that's been the biggest difference is the Chiefs have gotten that and the Bills haven't.
Yeah, and you really have never seen Stephon Diggs, for the most part, step up in a playoff game too for the Buffalo Bills. So he tends to disappear when the postseason comes around. So it'll be really interesting. I saw a comment from our one of our good friends on social media, Merck. He always has a lot of really good, poignant things to say, and he said like maybe the best way to dethrone the Kansas City Chiefs is not to try to play the Kansas City Chiefs game. You got to create and establish your own identity, and then you have to go out there and you have to dictate to the Chiefs how you're going to play football as opposed to letting them dictate and to worry about them. And that really stuck with me because that's what pretty much the focus of tonight's show is going to be. Like, what kind of football team do we want to be? What kind of football team are we capable of creating because of the salary cap restrictions that we're going to have? And to me, it seems like it's going to be the tale of two off seasons for the Buffalo Bills, right? On one hand, you have a lot of people on social media now, I would say a good majority, maybe 80, 90% on social media who are very vocal. They just want to outscore everyone. They want to go out and they want to add 2-3 wide receivers. They want to add a running back. They just want to give Josh Allen all the toys and go out and try to put up 40 points every game. That's certainly an identity, right? Being the offensive juggernaut, just having an offense full of stars like the San Francisco 49ers do. There are probably a smaller majority on social media who understand just how many players, I'm not even going to say talent, just players are leaving this defensive line because their contracts are up and the Buffalo Bills have to now remold that defensive line. And if you watched that game last night, I think a lot of people realized like, oh my goodness, there were dogs up front on both of those teams on both sides of the ball. It was physical. It was aggressive in the trenches. Maybe the Buffalo Bills have to go and they need to build and establish their identity in that direction, right? So you have okay, let's go get out all the defensive tackles and the edge rushers we can and try to reestablish that defensive line for the umpteenth time. So there's those people. And then there's probably Brandon Beane who's somewhere in the middle and wants to do a little bit of both this offseason with what limited resources he has. But team offense or team defense, like we're going to have this conversation on multiple occasions over the course of the show. Where do you lie so far right now in this offseason?
Look, I mean, if you look at it statistically, right, the Bills were the 6th highest scoring offense in the league, 26.5 points per game in the regular season. The 49ers, NFC team in the Super Bowl, 28.9 points per game. That's 2.4 more points than the Bills. And the Chiefs were only at 21.8. So the Bills were averaging nearly 5 more points a game than the Chiefs this year on offense. And I will say this, like, you can throw as many draft picks, wide receivers, whatever, like you can do all that, right? But to me, the returns are going to be marginal when your offense is already this good statistically, right? You're not going to go from scoring 26.5 points a game to scoring 35 points a game. Like, it's just not realistic. The top scoring team in the NFL this year was still under 30 points per game scoring. So yes, it's possible to kind of inch up closer to that 30-point mark. And even in an amazing season, maybe you average over 30 points per game, but that's not really realistic. And that's not really, in my mind, throwing receivers and throwing weapons. Like, yes, I want more options. I want depth. I want guys who are going to be a fit in the offense, but I also want guys who are going to execute on game day, right? And I want guys who are going to show up on game day. So to me, like, the way I saw these playoffs play out and the way I see the Chiefs sort of in Chris Jones and that defensive line, and like, I know we're not trying to be the Chiefs, but I'm personally, I think I lean a little bit more towards defense personally. If I'm talking about investment when it comes to this offseason. Now, I know a lot of that's going to be getting guys back, right? Getting Matt Milano back. That's going to be huge. What's going to happen with Trey White, right? But there are so many holes on defense as we're about to do this roster deconstruction. Way more holes on defense from a roster position group standpoint than there are on offense. So realistically, I think a vast majority of the resources are going to have to go to the defense outside of maybe a premium draft pick. I just see that, I mean, just bodies, you're going to have to invest more in the defense during this offseason.
Yeah, and Bills are electric coming in because it's fun to do mock drafts, right? Like I've done a number of mock drafts where I've taken a receiver in the first 2 rounds, and it's kind of fun and it's exciting, like to think about, like, wow, imagine what Josh Allen could do with Stephon Diggs, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, James Cook, and Troy Franklin and Jalen Polk. Like that's fun to think about, right? But in reality, you know, Bills Are Electric is pretty spot on. He says defense. Brandon has 10 picks. You could take a defensive lineman in the first or the second round, and it doesn't stop you from getting one of those two wide receivers. And Chris Jenke comes in and says he's all for scoring 30 points a game, but not if you allow 40 points a game. And you saw the Philadelphia Eagles get into that trouble in the Super Bowl last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's going to be really interesting looking at the 49ers and looking at the Chiefs and this, obviously what the Buffalo Bills want to accomplish. They want to get to where those two teams were last night. Some of the players that stood out on Kansas City, Chris Jones, right? And then on San Francisco, you had Arik Armstead, like stood out. Like these
Really stood out. Yeah.
these interior guys who are not, and I like Ed Oliver. And we've done a 180 on Ed Oliver on this podcast, and we've gone from let's get rid of Ed Oliver to Ed Oliver truthers because of the way he played in the regular season. And we've talked about the caveat of the Buffalo Bills having short rest and how that might have affected them in the Chiefs game. So we're willing to maybe overlook it a little bit what happened in that playoff game. But you mentioned like they disappear in these playoff games. And as good as Ed Oliver is, as much of a game wrecker as he can be, Ed Oliver, I don't think has the physical characteristics necessary to ever take over a game the way Arik Armstead and Chris Jones did. You look at what else the Buffalo Bills want. They want a de facto 1B wide receiver opposite Stephon Diggs, a guy who can take the mantle. And you look at the San Francisco 49ers, and they have that kind of guy in Brandon Ayuk to go along with Deebo Samuel. So my question to you is if you can add one of these two things this offseason, and who's to say we can add either, right? Because we have the 28th pick in the draft and limited resources in free agency. But if you could add a 6'4", 6'5", 300+ pound, interior defender who disrupts, or you can add a high-end wide receiver number 2, future wide receiver number 1, but you can only have one of the two. What are you rolling with this offseason? That's the Sophie's choice here, right? Like what are you rolling with? What do you want more?
My heart says wide receiver, but my brain says defensive line. And the reason I say that is because the cupboard's pretty full on offense already, right? You have Khalil Shakir who came into his own down the stretch and really put up. You have Dalton Kincaid who's going to be entering year 2 after a rookie season. You have Dawson Knox who you expect to be healthy for the full season. You still have Stephon Diggs. You still have James Cook. So while maybe adding a premier wide receiver talent could push this offense to greater heights, without Daquan Jones under contract yet, and hopefully he will get re-signed, you literally have Ed Oliver at defensive tackle right now under contract outside of Eli Ankou. So like if I have to pick right now, I'm playing the numbers game and taking the defensive tackle.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you said the same exact thing, like the head and the heart, right? The heart, I think, is wide receiver. Like that's the emotional part. But the head is maybe like, okay, no, we need that interior disruptor. And Chris Jenke makes a great point. He says, I think Oliver can be capable of having a good game in big games. And I agree, but there's the caveat, right? But I think he needs other players around him to help. Chris Jones didn't need no help, right? Like Arik Armstead didn't need no help. They were the ones disrupting, just solo dolo, disrupting, and they were the ones helping other people find success. So
you can see what a difference a dominant interior presence can make in a game like that. Well, in any big game, because it starts with the trenches in so many of these games, right? And that defensive line, although they gave up plays to McCaffrey throughout the game, when they needed it most, they came up big. And Chris Jones is a dominant interior player, pass rush and run defender. And so like those players, I feel like in today's NFL are rarer than finding good wide receiver talent. I think that there's a plethora of wide receiver talent. And I think that the nature of the game today lends itself to that you will have an easier time finding wide receiver talent than you will finding a game-wrecking, game-changing, dominant interior defender like a Chris Jones, like an Aaron Donald type. It's just harder to find those guys, right? And so when you can find them, you got to hold on to them. And that's why these guys like Chris Jones are going to get incredibly ridiculous, massive contracts, and the market's going to tell you how important those types of guys are.
All right, we could sit here and probably talk for an hour about this Super Bowl and its ramifications on the Buffalo Bills, but we have a job to do tonight, and that is to deconstruct the Buffalo Bills roster. And before we do, proud to announce we have re-upped our sponsorship deal with Picasso's Pizza. So this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza, 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like you and I, Dave, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. And someone else was in the comment section a second ago saying they saw a picture of Josh Allen eating some Picasso's Pizza. So maybe Josh Allen's a fan of the Air Raid Hour. Maybe he's a fan of Picasso's Pizza. Who knows? Maybe Josh is watching right now. Hello, Josh. If you are watching, we're about to say some nice things about you, because the first position in our roster deconstruction, and we're just going to go position by position, offense to defense. We're going to start with the quarterback position. It's going to be a pretty quick conversation. On the roster, the Buffalo Bills have Josh Allen, and they have Shane Buechele, who they signed to a futures deal. They have Kyle Allen as an unrestricted free agent. Some moves the Buffalo Bills will likely make in terms of money this offseason is they're going to base salary restructure Josh Allen to save about $20 million to the $50 million over the cap that they are currently. So that's a no-brainer. You'll see that announced at some point this offseason. But Dave, on a needs scale, from major need to average need to minor need, where would you put quarterback? Because there's only 2 on the roster right now.
I mean, less than minor need. I mean, it's like you can bring back Kyle Allen for all I care. The fact is like you just need a body, and you need someone who. I mean, we had Matt Barkley there for a couple of years because he knew the system, and obviously he was, kind of good to have on the sideline for Josh. Like, I'm fine if you want to just bring back Kyle Allen. I'm fine if you even want to go out and give Mitch Trubisky another look, since he just got. It will be gone. I mean, to me, it's like a less than minor. Like it's below minor, because it's just like the limited resources you have. Again, if Josh Allen goes down, your season is pretty much done. Now, Charles makes a good point. One of our 6th-round picks take a swing. I don't mind if you keep like 10 draft picks taking a swing on like a developmental type guy, but it is a super low need in my opinion. Minor.
Mean, I don't even know if we have the resources this offseason to really draft a quarterback late. And a couple people are coming in and saying, draft a quarterback late. If you draft Sam Hartman late, is he beating out Kyle Allen? Is he beating out Shane Buechele? Like, is he beating out those guys? If not, you're almost killing a draft pick. Like, maybe if a guy like Joe Milton, who's got a little bit more toolsy traits closer to Josh Allen, is sitting around in the 6th, 7th round, maybe the Buffalo Bills pull the trigger. But at the end of the day, I just think you're going to see a rinse and repeat of last offseason, because I think the Buffalo Bills just have bigger fish to fry. And right now it's Kyle Allen, I think, versus the field for whoever is willing to take that league minimum, like $1.82 million contract. Mitch Trubisky was just released today. The cool thing about Mitch Trubisky is not that he's a good quarterback, because he is not, but that if the Buffalo Bills were to sign Mitch Trubisky, it does not count against the compensatory pick formula. And the Buffalo Bills are going to lose some guys this offseason. So my guess is probably going to be Mitch Trubisky versus Kyle Allen, who's willing to take the better deal. Like, that could end up being where you go if you're the Buffalo Bills. But some other names: Drew Lock, Joe Flacco, Carson Wentz, Mason Rudolph, Tyrod Taylor, Joshua Dobbs, Easton Stick, and Brandon Allen. Insert some semi-veteran or veteran quarterback who has been, around the league somewhere. The Case Keenums of the world, the Kyle Allens of the world, the Mitch Trubiskys of the world, and that is likely who will be the Buffalo Bills' number 2 quarterback next season.
Yeah, and I mean, I like the comment of Kyle Allen versus Mitch Trubisky, or maybe even Kyle Allen versus the field. Whoever will take less money, I think, is the guy that you bring.
Whoever wants to be Josh Allen's best friend for a year, you can. That's your payment. Is you get to be Josh. You get to be close to Josh Allen. That's your payment. You don't collect a salary.
Comes with benefits. Comes with benefits for sure.
All right, on to the running back position. The Buffalo Bills have currently 3 running backs under contract: James Cook, Nyheim Hines, remember that guy, and
Mm.
Darrington Evans, who they signed to a futures deal. He is back in Buffalo. Pending unrestricted free agents, Latavius Murray, Ty Johnson, and also another guy who I honestly completely forgot about, Damian Harris, who is contemplating retirement since his neck injury that he suffered in the middle of the season was placed on IR. Where would you place running back on the needs scale? Major need, average need, minor need?
I may get some flack for this, but I'm gonna say running backs minor need also. Like I
Mhm,
would be fine. I'm fine kind of expecting a Naheem Hines pay cut here coming up. The way Brandon Bean talked about him in the presser made it seem like he
mhm,
was in their future plans. I expect that there'll be some kind of pay cut for Naheem Hines. Presuming he comes back healthy, he'll have some
mhm.
options as maybe like the return man RB2 type. And I wouldn't mind seeing the Bills bring back Ty Johnson as well if they
Yeah.
were gonna kind of bring back one of the guys that
Mhm.
are of these 3 guys, Latavius Murray, Damian Harris, who might retire anyway, and Ty Johnson. Wouldn't mind seeing them bring back Ty Johnson, but I think the need's minor. And Chris says bring Ty Johnson back as well. I was very impressed with what I
Mhm.
saw from him, and I think when you saw the type of season James Cook had, established himself as one of the premier running backs in the league, obviously recognized with the Pro Bowl
Mhm.
nod, and also showed his capability to really handle a pretty fairly big workload. That's probably the biggest workload you're going to see from a Bills running back in
Mhm.
this type of offense, I would imagine. So I say it's minor because I think they can find a power guy if that's what they
Yeah.
really want. I think they can bring back
Mhm.
Ty Johnson if they really wanted to. There's not a glaring need like maybe you had a year ago after the Naheem Hines situation, and we were
Yeah.
wondering what was going to be the case behind James Cook. So for me, it's minor still, I think.
A bunch of people coming in the comment section saying we need a true power, short yardage type of back. What type of running back are you looking for? So let's say in this situation, right? One of two things is going to happen with Naheem Hines. He's going to restructure his contract to significantly lower his cap number, or he's going to get cut. Right? It's $5 million in savings if you release Naheem Hines. It's a 500K cap hit. I don't think in this day and age the Buffalo Bills, especially with the situation they find themselves in, are going to pay Naheem Hines anywhere close to the $5.5 million cap hit that he is this season. It's just not going to happen. So a
Yeah.
restructure or a release is coming for Naheem Hines. I think Ty Johnson is a safe bet to return. The question is, does he return as RB2 or does he return as RB3? I think most people would like to see him return as RB3/kick returner, and they would like to add maybe a different element to our running game, and that is sort of a bruiser type of running back. But say the Buffalo Bills release Naheem Hines and it is James Cook and Ty Johnson as your two main backs. What is
Mhm.
that third element you would like to add to the running back room? What traits are you looking for the position?
Well, I think traits wise, you are looking for someone stylistically that probably
Mhm.
mirrors what Latavius Murray was supposed to be, right? And at times was, right? I'm not going to say it was all bad for Latavius Murray in 2023 because
No.
he did start out the season pretty
Yeah.
well, right? And just kind of
Mhm.
like a little bit faded. You want that guy who's going to be a bit of a power guy. You want the guy who's going to be good in pass protection. You want a guy you can trust in short yardage. That doesn't necessarily have to mean it's some big bruising guy, but that's typically what that's associated with. You still want someone who's efficient in those situations. And Latavius Murray just kind of faded a little bit down the
Mhm.
stretch. So I think stylistically, you'd look for someone like a Latavius Murray if you already had James Cook and Ty Johnson or James Cook and Naheem Hines in tow. Um, that would be the complement that I would look for, someone that you could rely on.
Mhm.
Exactly. Chris echoing my points here as
Yep.
well. Power rushing between the tackle and pass protection, I think, is crucial. And then obviously that kind of
Mhm.
lends itself to being a goal line type of person as
Yep.
well. So, yeah, I think if you look at Latavius Murray and rewind it 10 years and look for someone like that, that's probably what you're looking for.
Yeah, I literally have in my notes. They're just a younger Latavius Murray, a guy
Mhm.
who can lower his shoulder, lower the boom as a runner, is a good pass protector. I know Joe Brady had some success with the Mike Davis in Carolina a couple of seasons ago when he was coordinating in Carolina. So that's like short, squatty, veteran type of presence at running back. A guy who early in the season can take the pressure off of Josh Allen in short yardage situation, keep Josh Allen fresh for the home stretch in the playoffs. Now, obviously, if it doesn't go as expected, like hopefully the Buffalo Bills pivot sooner than they did this season. But I mean, I'm not going to get too into the weeds with the draft picks and the free agents like the people are in the comment section right now. We have plenty of shows to do that this offseason, but I wrote 2 example backfields that I would just love to see this offseason. If we went the free agent route, I would love to see James Cook, Deontay Foreman, and Ty Johnson. That's a good running back room. That's probably pretty cheap and cost effective, right? If you went
Foreman was nice this year too
yeah.
for Chicago when he was called upon.
If you go the draft route, I didn't go for any of the early guys, like early day 3, late day 2 guys. Like I didn't use the Braylon Allens or the Audric Estimes, but how about James Cook, Ty Johnson, and Frank Gore Jr.? That could be interesting, right? He had a really good Shrine Bowl and all of those various different things. Anyone but James Cook's brother. I have no interest in Alvin Cook, but that's just an example of, I think, what Bills fans should probably expect. I don't think we're going to be chasing, and we had this conversation earlier in the offseason or during the regular season when our season was starting to go off the cliff. We started talking a little off season, and we talked about like in Detroit, like David Montgomery is the North Star. As good as Jahmyr Gibbs is, David Montgomery is the North Star. Is James Cook ever going to be that North Star back? Who knows? As good as he is, I don't think he's your North Star. So do you want to spend money? Go get a Derrick Henry. Do you want to spend money? Go get, I don't have the list of free agents in front of me, but a more established type of guy. I don't think the Buffalo Bills have that kind of money to spend.
No, and I don't think it's money well spent either, right? If you're talking about like giving Josh Allen another weapon or really having to fill in that defensive front,
especially when come December and January, it's going to be Josh Allen run the ball in those situations anyway. Like,
it's just not money well spent.
All right, let's move on to wide receivers now under contract. The Buffalo Bills have Stephon Diggs. The Buffalo Bills have Khalil Shakir. The Buffalo Bills have Deontay Hardy. They have signed to a futures deal Andy Isabella, KJ Hamler, Tyrell Shavers, and Brian Thompson. And they also have under contract Justin Shorter, who spent the year on injured reserve, the former 5th-round pick. Upcoming free agents for the Buffalo Bills, obviously a huge decision on Gabriel Davis, and Trent Sherfield is a free agent as well. So essentially, and we're going to get to this in a moment, all of the Bills' boundary wide receiver depth is up for a new contract. Some notes, right? Deontay Hardy, I think you're probably going to see either a release or a restructure with him. The Bills are up against it money-wise. It's $4 million in savings. It's a $1.3 million cap hit to release Deontay Hardy. They might work out some kind of restructure where he can earn all of that money back in bonuses, but lower his cap hit, maybe move him down the depth chart and make Deontay Hardy more of a return specialist this upcoming season. So that's a thing to keep an eye out for. And obviously Stephon Diggs, I don't think the Bills have a choice money-wise. I think they have to base salary restructure him, which is going to lock him in even longer term because it's going to guarantee salary even further down the road because it's turning non-guarantees into guarantees. But I just don't think the Buffalo Bills have a choice. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of smoke around Stephon Diggs most offseason. I think a lot of it's going to be superficial. But let's just get to it. Like on a need scale, what we have, Diggs, Shakir, Hardy, Isabella, Shorter, Hamler, Shavers, Thompson, major need, average need, or minor need?
I think it's somewhere between average and major. I'm not ready to call it a major need yet because you still have Stephon Diggs and you still have Khalil Shakir. But you do need to add a piece here. You may need to add multiple pieces. You're right about Deontay Hardy. I think Greg laid it out perfectly in his cap, like mini preview cap show. Prime candidate for a pay cut, right? Or release. I mean, I think if you're Deontay Hardy, the writing is on the wall. If the Bills come to you and ask you to take a pay cut, you're probably going to take it given what you know about the wide receiver free agency class and given what we know about the wide receiver draft class. If Deontay Hardy wants to kind of, lock in some assurances, he would probably take a pay cut. So that leaves still a glaring hole with Gabe Davis likely out of the building. And obviously Trent Sherfield probably won't be back either. So look, I think that this would probably be a major need if Khalil Shakir didn't step up the way he stepped up the second half of 2023. But it's still certainly a moderate and could make the argument that it is a major need if you are looking to the future and you're looking to try to find the heir apparent to Stephon Diggs, who I do believe will get restructured, like you said. You need to have a little bit of an eye on the future here too if you're the Buffalo Bills. So I would say it's somewhere between a moderate and major need.
Yeah. Assessing what the Buffalo Bills have outside of Hardy, obviously you have Stephon Diggs, obviously you have Khalil Shakir, and then you have like Justin Shorter. So really, it's two guys I think that you can really count on in the wide receiver group. That's why I have it personally as a major need heading into the 2024 season, just because there's a lack of like proven bodies. Now, the response that I get from a lot of people is like, well, we have Justin Shorter. You don't know what Justin Shorter is going to be.
Look at all that's so I can't get on board with that.
I agree. And Chris Jenke comes in and says, I think Shorter's best chance of making the roster has become this season's version of Jake Kumro. I think that's spot on. Tall, big receiver who has speed, can block, play good special teams. That's his path to a roster spot, right?
Agreed.
You look back at the Super Bowl last night. Chris Conley played a role for San Francisco, right? You had Justin Watson, who I think played an amplified role for the Chiefs this year, but he really is not going to play that role going into the future. He's more like a fourth or a fifth guy. And you have even a guy like Juwan Jennings, who might be more getting closer to Gabe Davis territory, right? That's what I think Justin Shorter is going to be. Like, come in and help us rejuvenate our special teams by being a gunner, be the fifth, sixth wide receiver that gets a minimal amount of snaps a game. Maybe you can do a little bit of a Gabe Davis type of stuff on the boundary in a pinch when there's an injury to whomever we replace Gabriel Davis with. Maybe you can be used to stretch the field occasionally, right? Maybe who knows how he gets after it as a blocker. Maybe you can, carve out a role like that from the wide receiver position. But to think he's going to step in here and like fill Gabe Davis's shoes or be one of the top three receivers on this football team, like I just don't envision that being in the cards for Justin Shorter. Or at least I don't want to bank on it being in the cards for Justin Shorter. So when you look at it, Dave, what type of wide receiver are we looking for? Because to me, the type is pretty clear based on what we have. Diggs and Shakir, and then kind of Shorter, Hardy. Like, I think the type of wide receiver the Buffalo Bills are looking for is probably pretty obvious. But what are you looking for in terms of what kind of wide receiver you want the Buffalo Bills to bring in?
The kind of wide receiver I'm looking for is a downfield threat, but it's not in the same necessarily mold as a Gabe Davis, right? I think that Gabe Davis was I'll call him a pseudo downfield threat, right? I mean, he was really good at those sort of post routes. He was really good at sort of getting up the seam, but he wasn't necessarily the guy that was going to take the top off the defense. He did it at times, but it was more, honeypot corner, honeypot in the cover two, hitting the hole in the cover two. It wasn't necessarily something that was going over the top. So to me, I'm looking for a guy that can actually stretch the field as much as we thought maybe Deontay Hardy could give us some of that when we signed him last offseason. I want a legitimate threat that can do that this offseason. And I want someone who's a little bit more of a complete route runner that can do that. And that's a premium player, right? And that's what that is. That's a premium player. That's someone who is someone you'd think about taking in, day 1, day 2 of the draft. There may be a guy out there like that in free agency, like a T. Higgins that we probably can't afford, but like it's a premium player, right? And it's a guy that I think needs to be able to stretch the field for the Bills. As good as that Bills offense was, their explosive plays in the passing game mainly came from yards after catch, right? From guys like Shakir, et cetera. It wasn't necessarily from air yards or hitting on big plays over the top. So that to me is, I think, where the Bills are really deficient, I think, in the wide receiver room. They have Shakir who can work underneath and get yak. They have Diggs, obviously, who can do a little bit of it all. We'll get to tight ends here in a second, but they really need that reliable field stretching guy that sort of is like what Gabe Davis gave them, but I think more than that, I would say. And I think it's a premium player.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, like my ideal offseason would be to add a draft pick in the first 3 rounds who has size and speed to stretch the field on the boundary, and would be to add a veteran who can play the boundary or can play inside, kind of like an Emmanuel Sanders type. I don't think you're going to get a player the caliber of Emmanuel Sanders, but that type, right? I think that would be the perfect offseason for me, because I think we need two bona fide dudes, like one top 3 pick and one pretty decent money free agent with the money we have, the limited resources we have. I think we need bodies and depth at the boundary receiver position. Guys who can line up on the outside consistently, not Khalil Shakir, who does it occasionally, right? Not Deontay Hardy or Trent Fisher. We need some guys who legitimate are boundary threats at wide receiver. It'll allow you to be more versatile with Stephon Diggs. It'll allow you to play Khalil Shakir in his natural position, I think, which is in the slot. And those boundary receivers have to be natural separators. They need to have speed, and they need to have field stretching ability. When it comes to the draft, I think there are 20, 25 receivers that I love in this draft. This draft is loaded. But there are 4 dudes that I have zeroed in on. There are 4 dudes in this draft that I've zeroed in on that I think match the criteria that I just mentioned, right? Boundary, player, natural separator, speed, field stretching ability. Brian Thomas Jr., I think, is probably number 1. Troy Franklin, which is everyone's love right now from Oregon, number 2. Xavier Legette from South Carolina, number 3. And Javon Baker from UCF, number 4. Like, those are my big 4. Those are my power 4 right now. I'm still working on Adonai Mitchell. Still looking what we got there. I'm not 100% familiar with his game. I'm not really ready to make an assessment on his game yet. Xavier Worthy, his frame scares me, but I love his game. But these are guys that bring the speed and boundary element, and I think what I think the Buffalo Bills need. And I'll tell you what, I wouldn't mind if they just made themselves a statement off season, right, and trade up for Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze if one of them falls. I wouldn't mind that, but that's living in a dream scenario world. An early look at some free agents that stand out, Dave. Any of these guys stand out to you? Hollywood Brown, Quez Watkins, Curtis Samuel, Kendrick Bourne, DJ Chark, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Darnell Mooney, Noah Brown, DeMarcus Robinson, KJ Osborne. Does anyone really stick out to you and like, okay, cool. I like that guy. Anyone more than the other? I know we're going to do our free agency show next week, but.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love Curtis Samuel, the player. I think he to me is more of like, he's not really a field stretcher though. He's more of like the guy that can work underneath, a good route runner. He would be a little bit redundant, I think, to what we have with Shakir. I think he can do it. I think athletically, maybe he's a little bit more gifted than Shakir, but I like him as a player. I think Quez Watkins is a name that has been mentioned a few times. Should be fairly reasonably priced, pretty cheap. He is a field stretcher. He is truly that vertical guy. He would be more of like, I would say I don't want to insult him, but he's I think a lesser version of Gabe Davis, although I think he's faster and probably can get down the field a bit quicker, but he's not really a complete wide receiver, right?
Yeah, he's one trick pony, field stretching.
He's strictly a vertical guy. So when you start to think about that, you really have to pick and choose traits, right? In this free agency, because you're not going to get it all with one guy. So, and I kind of agree. Like maybe none of those guys are worth money. Now, if you pair like a Quez Watkins with a draft pick, like a Javon Baker, then that's something I can get on board with.
And here's the thing too. Like you say, none of these guys are worth the money. I feel like maybe one of these guys is not going to really get a contract.
They're worth the money if they're cheap, right? I think.
Like I feel like one of these guys is going to fall through the cracks. One of the 12 guys I just mentioned is going to fall through the cracks, and you might be able to get them for a relatively cheap, like 1-year deal, and maybe you tack on a second void year to lower the cap hit or whatever. My dream scenario would be Hollywood Brown on a 1-year prove-it deal wants to come play with Josh Allen.
I like Hollywood
Brown. Get a bunch of yards, get a bunch of tutties, and then go hit free agency next offseason. That's the dream. That's the dream scenario right there. Because I think before the injury started to pile up for him, people were talking about him as maybe a $20 million wide receiver. So it'll be really interesting to see the market for Hollywood Brown and the market for some of these other guys. But that's a conversation for another day. Let's move on to tight ends here. The Buffalo Bills have under contract Dalton Kincaid, their first-round pick, Dawson Knox, who they just recently paid. I'm going to put Reggie Gilliam in here, the fullback. He's under contract. They signed to a futures deal Trey McKitty, and I'm not exactly sure if this player is a Buffalo Bill or not. He was with the Bills in training camp last year. He got hurt when on injured reserve. Zach Davidson. So maybe Zach Davidson is on the Bills roster come training camp. Maybe he is not, but I will list him now anyway. And then Quentin Morris is a exclusive rights free agent, meaning it probably won't be very difficult for the Buffalo Bills to retain him. He's essentially back on the Buffalo Bills roster next year as well. Dave, in terms of major, average, or minor need, I think I know where you're going to go with this one, but where are you going with tight end?
I mean, same as quarterback, maybe even less minor than quarterback. This is one room where the Bills were in purgatory for years. They got Dawson Knox, kind of got themselves out of purgatory. Now they have Dalton Kincaid. I mean, this room is set. Dawson Knox, I mean, there's a lot of rumblings about him. He's not going to go anywhere. So to me, this room is set. Great room, maybe one of the better rooms in the NFL at this position. So super minor.
Yeah, I mean, for those people too who are like, well, we need to get rid of Dawson Knox. If Dawson Knox is released, $20 million dead cap hit, period. If Dawson Knox is traded before June 1st, he's an $11.7 million dead cap hit, and you save $2.6 million. Not worth it. Not going to happen. So then you get into the post June 1st stuff, and you can earmark players post June 1st, but it's important to note, if you earmark a player post June 1st, that money that you save also you don't get until after June 1st. And what free agents are really sitting around post June 1? Obviously, you have your Leonard Floyds and stuff of the world. Maybe things are a little bit different nowadays, but in reality, you don't know what you're going to expect in the free agent market post June 1st. A post June 1st release for Dawson Knox would be a $12.5 million dead cap hit this season, $7.8 million next season, for a $1.8 million savings. And a post June trade is probably the easiest way to get Dawson Knox off your roster. It's a $3.9 million dead cap in 24, a $7.8 million dead cap in 25, and then $10.4 million in savings this season. It's just not happening, folks. And for people who said such a horrible contract, listen, the guy was a touchdown machine for the tight end position. We didn't know that Dalton Kincaid was going to fall into our hands. And the contract is relatively easy to get out of after this season in 2020.
Yeah, and you're not going to restructure him because you want to give yourself that flexibility to get out of it after this year. So, and look, the combination of what you're paying Knox and Kincaid,
you're not going to find me as someone who's going to bash that contract. From when he signed it, I think it was a pretty solid contract, especially considering someone says Njoku's fault, the money that tight ends have been getting around. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, the question is not what you need at the tight end position. And maybe this is a question for another day, but it's how to better utilize what we have. Because I think in 2024, Dalton Kincaid's going to need to be fed like a Travis Kelce in 2024. And Dawson Knox, you need to find a way to work in 12 personnel packages. You need to find a way to weaponize him in the red zone. You need to make sure that he still makes his way onto the field a ton, but also with the understanding that Dalton Kincaid is your alpha. He needs to be fed like Travis Kelce in 2024.
Yeah, and if you start to look around the league, like outside of Travis Kelce, what teams do you point to when you say their tight end is truly their number one weapon in the passing game? Like the Chiefs are pretty much it, right? Even the best tight ends in the league, TJ Hawkinson behind Justin Jefferson, right?
Yeah.
Dalton Kincaid, you still have Stephon Diggs, right? Maybe Mark Andrews is probably the only other one that you would say is their top receiving option at the tight end position. So if Dalton Kincaid can kind of come close to that and get himself in kind of that TJ Hawkinson sort of tier where you have like that Justin Jefferson that you paired with Hawkinson, Stephon Diggs paired with Dalton Kincaid, he's got to be
Mark Andrews.
Yeah,
I think
Mark Andrews. Him and Kelce are really it, because even Kittle is not even the primary weapon for San Francisco's passing game. So to me, it's got to be Dalton Kincaid's got to be like pretty much the number 2 option this year, I think, in the passing game behind Stephon Diggs.
And John points out, like, Dawson Knox's contract is probably why you're not chasing wide receivers in free agency, because that's where the money would have gone, right? Traditionally, the money you pay your wide receiver number 2, unfortunately, right now, you're paying it to Dawson Knox. Like, it's just the way it is at this point. In terms of the way the contract is structured and the way the Buffalo Bills really can't get out of it until 2025. Shifting our focus now to the offensive line. Let's start with offensive tackle. Under contract heading into the 2024 season, Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, Ryan Vandemark, Richard Garage, and Tommy Doyle. Remember him? Jermaine Ifedi is a free agent,
Important or
kind
not?
of. He was cut from our regular roster and he was on the practice squad roster. So technically he's not listed as a UFA, but he's no longer on the Buffalo Bills despite spending the whole season with the Buffalo Bills. So Jermaine Ifedi is a UFA. On a needs scale, where are you putting offensive tackle specifically? Because there's a talking point that we need to get to in a moment. Is it a major need, an average need, or a minor need?
I mean, I think that I'm kind of looking at this relative to other position groups. So I think relative to other position groups, it's a minor need.
Mhm.
You do have some expiring
Yep.
contracts now, so that maybe pushes it to maybe more of like an average need as far as what you need to address, right? You're probably going to give Deion
Mhm.
Dawkins an extension. You have to decide whether you want to pony up now to maybe give Spencer Brown an
Mhm.
extension, but you have your bookends under contract for 2024. You have the option to extend both of those guys. Likely you can approach, I would imagine you're going to approach Deion Dawkins for sure about an
Yep.
extension at some point this offseason. But you know what? I'll say it's average from a future looking
Mhm.
standpoint, but for 2024, it's minor.
Yeah, I put it as an average need, and I just think personally, my philosophy from now on, offensive and defensive line will always be an average need. Like I just feel like you always want to add bodies, especially on day 3 of the draft, to these position groups, and I think this position is gonna be no different. So I put average need mostly
Mhm.
because, as you just mentioned, 2 players with 1 year left on their deal, both of our starters,
Yep.
Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. You mentioned sort of the idea of an extension. I think a Deion Dawkins extension would be wise for the Buffalo Bills because it would lower that cap hit in 2024 and give the Buffalo Bills a little bit of money to possibly play with, inch themselves closer to zero from that
And he's
negative
got years
$50
left.
million mark. Yeah, he's got
It's
years
not
left
like
in the
you're
tank.
kicking it down the road because you need to. Like
Uh-huh.
he deserves it, right? He's playing at a
Now,
great level. So
now Spencer Brown is different, right? You're
yeah.
playing a dangerous game with Spencer Brown. The price goes up if he recreates his 2023 and 2024. And then the question is like, do you want to pay a premium for a right tackle? Right? Like, I personally think I would. If you have a good right tackle, I've seen teams let good right tackles go and probably regret it. And I've seen teams like the Eagles pay their right tackle in Lane Johnson and not regret it. Right. So to me, if Spencer Brown clicks, I would I would pay the man, even though maybe right tackle isn't considered a premium position. What are your thoughts on paying not just your left tackle, but paying your right tackle as well?
The question I think is when do you do that with Spencer Brown,
Mhm.
right? Because you roll the dice, and if he has another good season, his price tag probably goes up, although you probably have a little bit more flexibility with your cap space in
Mhm.
2025, right? Or do you try to get it now to where you're going to maybe squeeze a little bit of cap savings out of 2024, but really not much, right? Because he's on that rookie contract still.
Yep.
So I'm with Bills are electric here. Don't extend him now.
Mhm.
It's a wait and see. I think it's a wait and see for Brown. I think you see how he pans out this season. If he has a good season, you go into the 2025
Yeah.
offseason and in good faith, you try to give Spencer
Mhm.
Brown an extension before he hits free agency to reward him for his good play. And right, you do have that expectation that your 2025 cap situation will be better than this year. So I'm a wait and see.
Mhm.
Although I'm hoping it works out for
Yeah.
him and the Bills do sign him.
And another point to consider too with Spencer Brown is he's younger than Deion Dawkins, right? He's uber athletic. So he's a guy who maybe when Deion Dawkins finally does make the decision to leave, he's a guy you switch from the right side to the left side if he ever gets there as a player. We don't know if he'll ever get there as a player, but maybe he's the kind of guy when Deion Dawkins walks away can kick over to the left-hand side and that exorbitant right tackle contract you pay him becomes a bargain when he's over there on the left-hand side. So that's an interesting thing to consider. Another thing to consider when adding a body to the offensive line, Chris Jenke pointed this out, and I have it in my notes. Ryan Vandemark is a left tackle by trade. Like he struggled at right tackle in the preseason. It was him having to show that he could play right tackle and be a swing tackle in that last preseason game to sort of earn him a roster spot. So I like some of the developmental guys that they have in Ryan Vandemark and Richard Garage, but are they true swing tackles? Do they have to go out and find a veteran like a Jermaine Ifedi? Do they need to draft a guy who's got right tackle experience in the draft? That's something I think that you need to consider as well if you're the Buffalo Bills. And that's why it makes it, to me, seem like an average need as opposed to a minor need. Onto the interior of the offensive line now. The Buffalo Bills have under contract Mitch Morse, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, Ryan Bates, Alec Anderson, and Kevin Jarvis. And they have unrestricted free agent David Edwards to consider. A talking point all offseason is going to be Mitch Morse and whether the Buffalo Bills should retain Mitch Morse. I think this is another guy who you might see them add some void years onto the tail end of his contract to maybe lower his cap hit. And that's Mitch Morse. A release of Mitch Morse would save you $8 million. And it would be a dead cap hit of $3 million. So it's something that I think the Buffalo Bills, being tight up against the cap, have to consider, especially with the money that they're paying Ryan Bates. But where do you put interior offensive line on a needs scale? And should Mitch Morse be the Bills starting center in 2024?
I'll answer the second question first. Yes, he should. I think if I was the Bills, I'd approach Mitch Morse and maybe ask him if he'd be willing to take a pay cut, because I don't think he's going to get $11.5 million on the open market, which is what his cap number is this year. I think exactly what Bills Are Electric is saying here. Ask Mitch to take less money. Say, hey, look, you're $11.5 million cap hit this year. We're willing to retain your services for this year, but not beyond. How's about $7.5 million sound? How does $8 million sound? And the Bills can still save about $3 million against the cap. Mitch Morse still gets paid pretty handsomely. He still then has the flexibility beyond 2024 to retire or do whatever he wants to do. And the Bills potentially have, have some options then on how to plan for the future, whether it's with Ryan Bates or maybe addressing through the draft, getting a center. But outside of that, I feel like the interior offensive line is in really good shape. They made the investment in Osiris Torrance and Connor McGovern last offseason between the draft and free agency. And you still have Ryan Bates there in waiting. Alec Anderson, we've been a fan of his. And look, we always thought that maybe this was a 2-year plan for Brandon Beane to address the offensive line. Last year, they kind of pivoted. We thought maybe they would go for tackle with Spencer Brown struggles. They went interior, invested in McGovern and Torrance. The interior now looks pretty set as far as the guard position. So really the question becomes about center, but I do expect Mitch Morse to be the starting center this year.
Bills Are Electric comes in and says, I would hope the Bills can re-sign David Edwards, if not too much money. Yeah, that's the question. So a couple of things with a guy like David Edwards, right? He's proven he can stay healthy. He had those head injuries in Los Angeles that sort of decreased his value and made him such a bargain for the Buffalo Bills last year. He's going to look for money. I don't know if he'll get a lot of money on the open market. And if he's not getting money, I think he's going to look for a starting opportunity. I think he might find a starting opportunity on the open market. I mean, Greg Van Roten was starting for the Las Vegas Raiders this year. Like, David Edwards might find a starting opportunity, or at least a better opportunity to start somewhere else. And I think he might leave for one of those two reasons. I wouldn't put a lot of hope in the David Edwards returning to the Buffalo Bills basket. You never know, right? But I wouldn't put a lot of hope in it. But that's why I kind of like the Buffalo Bills developmental plan. Like, I think if Mitch Morse were to step away, or if the Buffalo Bills felt like they needed to cut Mitch Morse to save that $8 million, I think Ryan Bates could be a plug and play center for the Buffalo Bills next year, and he would be fairly adequate in doing so. I think Ryan Bates could be the heir apparent to Mitch Morse. There's a lot of talk about drafting a center, and obviously you're going to want to draft a center to compete with Ryan Bates. But I think Ryan Bates is the heir apparent to Mitch Morse at center. And then you have Alec Anderson, who spent a year on the practice squad, and then he spent a year essentially redshirting on the active roster. I think Alec Anderson is now ready to step into the David Edwards shoes and be the backup guard center, right? And then on top of that, I think that he could eventually move into the Ryan Bates role and be even higher up the pecking order of the offensive line. He could be that extra blocker that they utilize in some of these certain situations, even though I hope they do less of that next year to get more of Dawson Knox on the field, but that's a conversation for a different day. I like the way Aaron Kromer is developing some of these young offensive linemen. You're starting to see it with Ryan Vandemark. You're starting to see Richard Garage coming into year 2. Even Kevin Jarvis. I wouldn't be surprised if we're having a conversation about, hey, there's a ton of reports talking about how good Kevin Jarvis looks, right? Aaron Kromer has a type. He goes out and he finds that type, and he develops those types. And I think that's paying dividends for the Buffalo Bills and the depth of this interior offensive line. So I got a question for you. Would you rather, because I think if you're looking at it, right, and you're the Buffalo Bills, and you're going to spend one day 2 pick on an offensive lineman, let's take pure guards out of the scenario here. You have one day 3 pick that you have earmarked for an offensive lineman. Are you taking a offensive tackle as insurance for a pending UFA, Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown? Or are you taking a development or center to work behind Morrison, Bates, and Anderson? Where are you going if you have one day 2 pick earmarked for an offensive lineman? Tackle or center?
That's a good question. Because we have Ryan Bates and because you're paying Ryan Bates what you're paying him, I'd probably say tackle. I would say tackle just because there is uncertainty. There's no guarantee you're going to get Spencer Brown back. I mean, yes, you have a good chance to, but the depth at tackle is much thinner, and there's obviously the chance that Spencer Brown might regress this year. And we've hated it over the years when the Bills haven't addressed tackle. And I really think they've done a good job investing in the interior and giving a contingency plan for Mitch Morse potentially leaving beyond 2024. Ryan Bates is there. So for all those reasons, I would say tackle.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to go off to tackle. And it's mostly just because I've already been sort of getting into my bag, scouting some of these day 3 offensive tackles. Christian Jones from Texas, Gary Greenfield from South Dakota State, Walter Rouse from Oklahoma, formerly of Stanford. And I also think it's like a weak center class after the top 2 or 3 guys. So to me, I'm going with offensive tackle. And the thing that's great with Aaron Cromer is it's like David Edwards, Alec Anderson. These were college offensive tackles too. So who's to say that offensive tackle that the Buffalo Bills draft doesn't eventually kick inside and become sort of like a guard center flex the way Aaron Cromer has been working with these guys. So that'll be really interesting as well. All right. So we have wrapped up now the offense. In a minute, we're going to get to the defense. But before we do, are you or somebody you know looking to advertise? If so, give us a call. We will say just about anything on these YouTube airways for money. Obviously, we love what we do and we would do it for free. But if you are looking to connect whatever sort of business you're operating, or if you know someone who has a business and they operate to the sort of clientele that watch this show, people from the Buffalo area or who love the Buffalo Bills, even if they're not from the Buffalo area, hit us up at thebillsguys@gmail.com and let us know, and we can pitch you on advertising with us here at the Air Raid Hour. All right, now that we've gotten that petty shill out of the way, on now to the roster construction of the Buffalo Bills defense. And let's start with edge rusher. And oh boy, this is a big yikes, right? You have Von Miller, Gregory Rousseau, Kingsley Jonathan, and Cameron Klein under contract, pending UFAs, AJ Epinesa, Leonard Floyd, and Shaq Lawson. On a needs scale, Dave, major, average, minor, where are you putting edge rusher?
I mean, people are going to be upset, but it's a major need, right? And here's the thing. If Von Miller further removed from the injury can give you something, right? Some semblance of positive play. He has to contribute in a meaningful way in 2024. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He was shielded a bit in 2023 because you had the good play of Leonard Floyd. You had the up and coming play of AJ Epinesa. You had Gregory Rousseau. You didn't 100% have to have Von Miller at his best in 2023. You're going to need to have him close to what his best is as far as what he's got left to offer in 2024. Because at the top, Rousseau and Miller doesn't look bad if you have a pretty decent Von Miller. But behind that, you are in shambles. You have nothing of note as far as experience, right? You have Kingsley Jonathan, who's played decently well in spots and has had some good preseasons, etc. But Cameron Klein is unproven and your depth is gone, right? In my off-season sort of plan, I'd love to be able to, with some of these restructures, whatever, bring back one of AJ Epinesa or Leonard Floyd to soften the blow a bit here, but that's no guarantee either. Those guys, like Leonard Floyd's probably going to get another $6, $7, $8 million one-year deal. AJ Epinesa is probably going to get somewhere in the $8 million to $10 million a year range, as painful as that sounds. So, look, you're going to have to probably let those guys walk, and you're going to have to retool this entire unit. It is a major need for me.
It's a major need for me as well. And honestly, it's going to be really interesting to see who it is that they prioritize and target this offseason on a number of levels, right? Just first on the position level, wide receiver, edge, defensive tackle, safety. Those are the big four needs. Where does Brandon Bean prioritize his resources? AJ Epinesa versus Leonard Floyd. Who is more important to Brandon Bean? Interior pressure or edge pressure? Do you want to build inside out or outside in? What is more important to Brandon Bean? There's just so many different ways in which he can go about attacking this offseason. How do you think he's going to attack it?
Well, first of all, I think you need to try to get Daquan Jones back, right?
100%.
As far as a
Mhm.
re-sign, I think that if you do some of these restructures and you are able to restructure Josh Allen, restructure Stephon Diggs, give Dawkins an extension, right? Cut maybe or have guys like Naheem Hines and Deontay Hardy take pay cuts. There is a chance you can bring back a guy like AJ Epinesa. I don't think you're going to be bringing
Mhm.
back both Leonard Floyd and AJ Epinesa, but if you can bring back one of the two of those guys, I would prefer you bring back AJ Epinesa just because he's younger.
Yeah.
Maybe not so great of a pass rusher, but Leonard Floyd was very much an early season maven. It kind of faded a
Mhm.
little bit down the stretch. I'm not saying he was bad, but AJ Epinesa really did make some game changing plays, right? And
Mhm.
so I think if you can do that, you have AJ Epinesa, let's say, back in the fold. You have Von Miller, you have Greg Rousseau.
Mhm.
Um, it gives you a little bit more flexibility and maybe bringing in a lower tiered vet
Mhm.
guy back. Maybe a Shaq Lawson comes back
Yep.
like that, and then allows you to maybe go into the draft with if a premium player falls to you in the first round or if a premium player is still there in the second round, you might take an edge player, and that's just the reality of it. So, but I think you need to get some bodies in
Mhm.
the door here in free agency to give yourself that flexibility. And I think that it can't just be bottom of the barrel
Mhm.
guys either. You have to make some kind of effort to bring in some kind of mid-tier guy in free agency.
And Nikki G comes in. He says Floyd already said to Matt Perino that he was following the money. I think that was taken out of context a little bit. So Nikki G, what he said was, "I'm going to go where I feel monetarily appreciated." Right? He's going to follow. He did use the word, I think, follow the money, which got him into some trouble, some hot water. But he also said he wanted to play for a contender. So there's only so many contenders, and those contenders only have so much money. So as much as what he says looks like he's just chasing a bag, I think he will be a little bit more pickier than maybe his words let on. It's got to be the combination of contender and a bag. So if the Buffalo Bills can free up some money and give him a contract similar to the one he just got, or maybe tack on a couple extra million, I think the Buffalo Bills could retain the services of Leonard Floyd if other contenders aren't willing to pay that price or give more years, etc. But at the end of the day, too, it's going to be really interesting to see and really intriguing to see how Brandon Bean can attack this because he's got limited resources this offseason. And where are you monetarily looking to go out and fill some of these holes? Because if you're the Buffalo Bills and I know some people personally that are like Von Miller, Gregory Rousseau, Kingsley Jonathan, Cameron Klein, cool. Bring back Shaq Lawson and let Sean McDermott figure that out. Go get wide receivers. I know people who are like, they're ready to go. That's their plan. After watching the Super Bowl, I don't know if that can be your plan. I really don't. Like, but at the end of the day, the resources are limited. And I think a lot of it is the Buffalo Bills just having to hope and pray that Von hits his stride 2 years post injury and Von Miller can contribute what Leonard Floyd contributed this year. That's what I
Has
think
to.
they have to hope
Has
for,
to.
right?
Has to.
And then you bring in you bring back Shaq Lawson, you look for some bargain veterans, you draft some guys who are younger and developmental, and you just like hope for the best. I don't know if the Buffalo Bills are going to monetarily have the money to go out and add that Leonard Floyd cherry on top. I don't even know if they're going to have the money to bring back AJ Epinesa, depending on what his market is. So the Buffalo Bills are going to maybe have to make it work, and they're going to have to hit on bargain free agents. They're going to have to hope Von Miller can get back to form. And they're going to have to hope they can hit on some draft picks who contribute early. And that's why I think, depending on how free agency goes, it might be a bigger draft day need for the Buffalo Bills than currently discussed. And if you are a Bills fan,
Mm,
you should start Googling Adiza Isaac. You should start Googling Darius Robinson. You should start Googling Braylon Trice, Jonah Ellis, Jalen Harrell, because those are some of the names that you might want to get familiar with, because one of those guys could be a Buffalo Bill on day one or day two of the draft.
yeah, and I think that as we kind of segue to talking about interior as well, like
Mhm.
there things are lining up, right? To where if you start looking at the depth of the class and the positions,
Mhm.
right, you can see yourself justifiably maybe waiting to take a wide receiver given how many good wide receivers there are, unless you can get one of those premium guys. It may make sense, as much as it's going to be painful for some people to accept, that you do have to invest another premium pick in defensive line. Um, the fact is, and I said it in the comment section, just purely from a body standpoint, defensive line is more of a need right now than wide receiver.
Mhm.
Now, but holes are going to get filled in free agency, right? It's just going to be a matter of like what caliber of player are going to fill these holes in free agency, and that's likely what's going to dictate whether or not you invest a
Mhm.
premium pick in the defensive line in the draft.
And a couple good points being made here. Chris Jenke says the main reason why he doesn't want to invest in Leonard Floyd and AJ Panessa, you got to think about Groot and the fact that his contract is up. He's going to obviously, the Bills have a decision to make on his 5th-year option. I assume it's going to get picked up this offseason, and then they have to pay him after next season. And John Herring coming in and saying, like, yeah, he's pointing out that it's not the greatest edge class in the world. So yeah, the Buffalo Bills are definitely picking from a shallower pool of prospects on the edge than they have in years previous. It's not the greatest year for edge rushers in the NFL draft. So let's shift our focus now to the interior. Under contract, the Buffalo Bills have 2 guys, one of them being Ed Oliver, the other being Ilianku. Pending unrestricted free agents, Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, Linval Joseph, and Poona Ford. Obviously, I think that we would both put this under the major needs
Mhm,
scale. To me, it's
mhm.
simple. Re-sign Daquan Jones. One tech is important, especially for freeing up Ed Oliver to do what Ed Oliver needs to do. To me, it's re-sign Daquan Jones and to recultivate the 2 guys behind him, whether it's through bargain bin free agents or the draft. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of assuming you can get Daquan Jones back, it's not all that dissimilar
Mhm.
to the conversation we just had on the top 2 edge players, right? With Von Miller and Rousseau, like what's behind them? And so presuming you can get Daquan Jones back, Daquan Jones and Al Oliver is a great top 2, but what's behind them? You probably do have to retool this a bit. Maybe Eli Ankou gets a legitimate shot to be in the 4-man rotation in
Mhm.
2024, depending on how free agency shakes out. But you know, there will be affordable defensive tackles available in free agency. My ideal outcome here is that you go into at worst case, you go into the
Mhm.
draft with 4 guys already on the roster,
Yep.
and then you can decide whether or not you want to invest any kind of premium draft capital in an interior
Mhm.
defensive lineman, whether that's a Tavondre Sweat or a Byron Murphy if he's
Yeah.
available, something like that, right? But you absolutely have to get Daquan Jones back in the mix. That's got to be like, to
Mhm.
me, that's the domino for everything else to fall when once free agency or pre-free agency, right? Like that's got to
Mhm.
be like, to me, number one priority if you're Brandon Bean.
Yeah, Claude Puig coming in saying sign Daquan, draft a 1 tech in the 5th or later, draft a 3 tech in the top 3 rounds. This is a position, depending on what goes on in free agency, that could be a double dip candidate with these 10 draft picks that we have. You could see the Buffalo Bills. Brandon Bean has pretty much said, like, I wanted to draft a defensive tackle last year, and the board just never fell the way I wanted it to. So I think you're
Mhm.
going to see Brandon Bean put an emphasis on drafting a young, cost controlled defensive tackle this year. And who knows, if we retain all 10 of those picks, maybe it's 2. Because I think after Daquan Jones, if you can get Daquan Jones back, your bargain bin free agent hunting. Eric's been doing a good job. Eric Turner's been doing a good job of posting on X all the various different prospects the Bills could be considering. Guys like Malcolm Roach, right? Not the high end names, but guys who will be available for a bargain. Tazir Tart, who was released by the Titans towards the end of last year. Those are the kind of guys that Eric has been scouting. Eric's been looking into, and he's doing a really good job posting those on X. And I think they'll probably get into it at some point in the film room as well. So make sure that you are watching the film room I want to see the Buffalo Bills. The one thing I do want to see at defensive tackle, I want to see them have on the roster 2 defined one techs. I want it to be Daquan Jones, and I want it to be Daquan Jones's protege, because it does take defensive tackles a little bit longer to develop. And I think
Mhm.
Daquan Jones showed enough pass rush pop last year. And I think the Bills have always been hesitant of only having one tech because they don't want to give up too much of the pass rush pop. They want one tech, one tech versatile, and then a bunch of 3 techs. That's essentially what the Buffalo Bills have been rostering for years now. You got Daquan Jones. Go get him a true one tech protege. You have guys like Gregory Rousseau, maybe Shaq Lawson, maybe Cameron Klein, who can all kick inside and play a little bit of 3 tech if they need to. If you're the Buffalo Bills, make it work. And I want to see a Daquan Jones. And then I want to see them followed up with a Tavondre Sweat or a Christian Boyd or a Marcus Murphy or any of those other type of later round of one techs that could be available. Like, I want to see 2 one techs. Go get a young Linval Joseph, right? A guy who's just a space eater. Even if maybe he's not going to get as many snaps as you would like, especially in his first season. All right, on to
Yeah, and then there's some guys that we
sorry.
talked about in last week with
Mhm,
John, Dwayne Carter, a couple
mhm,
others, right? Hall, right? So like, I mean, those aren't like massive dudes, but they would be like the archetype that the Bills have
mhm,
had at one tech, like the 320-pound range, 310 to 320-pound range.
mhm.
So there are options in the draft for sure.
All right, on to linebacker now. Under contract, the Buffalo Bills have Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, and Balon Spector. So some good names, but not a lot of names. Pending UFAs, Tyrell Dodson, AJ Klein, kinda. He was released from the practice squad at the end of the season, and Tyler Matakevich. So on a need scale, where are you putting linebacker given the fact that the Buffalo Bills only have 4 of them on the roster currently?
I'm saying it's minor, and I'm saying that
Mhm,
because I'm expecting Matt Milano to be back to health. You obviously got an all-pro caliber season out of Terrell Bernard. We really missed him in that
mhm,
playoff game. Um, you saw some flashes from Balon Spector and his playing time that he
yep,
got, and he can maybe be the heir apparent as well to Tyler Matakevich on special teams as that guy who can also maybe add a little bit more defensively than a guy like Matakevich could. And Dorian Williams, obviously, got to get it right mentally, but like athletically, the guy is phenomenal. And I think another year, in the system, obviously saw what Terrell Bernard developed. I'm not saying he's going to have that trajectory, but this is a nice group.
mhm,
It's a really nice core group of these 4 guys. You can find a special team linebacker. Like, no reason to continue to pay these guys like Tyler Matakevich multiple millions of dollars a year. You can
yes.
find a 5th linebacker, and I think Tyrell Dodson's probably earned a paycheck somewhere else. I would be surprised if the Bills really made a big push to bring him back, although I would like him back, but I don't think
Yep,
he will be back. But I think this is if you want to look at losing Tyrell Dodson as a big blow, then maybe you put it as a moderate, but for me, it's
mhm.
minor.
Yeah, I mean, even if Dodson doesn't find like a big payday, and as Chris Jenke says, hey, let him go and play the comp pick bingo. I don't even know if Tyrell Dodson's going to get enough money to maybe even get you into comp pick bingo territory, but maybe he does, right? So, but even if he doesn't, I think he's going to go look for playing time, and you're just not
Mhm.
going to find that playing time in Buffalo because we're a base 2 linebacker team and we have Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard. Dorian Williams, as you mentioned, I expect a year 2 bump, not to Terrell Bernard's level, but good enough to be a trusted backup who, if someone gets hurt, you can actually put onto the football field and not try to replace with AJ Klein after a week. And I think Balon Spector, when healthy, has flashed as well. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, Milano, Bernard, Williams, Spector, those are your 4 dudes, the 2 starters, the 2 backups. And then you just add a handful of late round picks, UDFAs, bargain bin free agents, right? The Traven Howard and Joe Giles Harris types. And you just have those 5 guys come in and compete for the 5th or maybe even 6th linebacker job on the Buffalo Bills 53-man roster. So to me, it's a minor need as well. The one last thing I have here in my notes, I'll tell you what, man, watching some of these games, thinking about this Bills Chiefs game, if Milano and Bernard were fully 100% healthy, I think the Buffalo Bills, I think we're
Mm,
celebrating us. I think we're celebrating a Super Bowl title today.
it's
I can't
always
wait to see
it's
them
always
back on the field together. I think we're celebrating the Buffalo Bills' first Super Bowl if those two are healthy. I really do.
I
It's tough
mean,
pill to swallow, and luck is a part of it. Like it just straight is. Like, but man, yeah, it's rough. But I can't wait to see those two back on the football field together.
yeah, and that's part of where, like, the Bills really need to, like, you talk about, like, limited resources, like, part of the defensive, allotment has to be, like, guys like Milano coming back, seeing what happens
Mhm,
um, with Kyrie maybe next year. Like, we're gonna get into the secondary, but, like, some of it
mhm,
has to be guys coming back from injury to kind of help offset the fact that you just have to bring in a lot of bodies on that
yeah.
defensive line.
All right, on to the cornerback position now, and this is kind of a mess here. Trey White, Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, Kyrie Elam, Teron Johnson, Saran Neal, Jamarcus Ingram, and Kyron Brown. So they have a number of guys under contract. Pending UFA is Dane Jackson, and then again, kind of Josh Norman, who was released from his practice squad contract at the end of the season. To me, this is a minor need, but you
Cam
have
Lewis also
Cam
free,
Lewis
I guess.
is I put him under safety.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but either way, corner safety flex. I think before we start any discussion,
Mm,
the first decision needs to be Tre'Davious White. Do you bring Trey White back after two major lower leg injuries? And if you do decide to bring him back, when will he be ready? Because Trey White, a pre June 1st release, he is a $10 million cap hit and $6 million in savings. A post June 1st release, he is a $6 million dead cap hit this year, $4 million next year, and $10 million in savings. That one is the tempting one. 6 mil this year, 4 mil next year against the cap, and $10 million in cap relief. I know you don't get that money until post June 1st, but that is probably the most tempting option with Tre'Davious White. It's probably what I would do if I were the Buffalo Bills, but I know that they are emotionally invested in that young man and his journey and him as a player and him as a person. So I don't know. What is your thoughts on Tre'Davious White and the decision the Buffalo Bills have in front of them?
yeah, this goes beyond, I think, just the injury in this specific
Mhm.
situation, right? I know it's a business. This is the first draft pick Sean McDermott made as head coach of this team. He's still technically under contract for next year as well. And there is a message that you maybe send to the locker room
Mhm.
depending on how you handle this Trey White situation. Now, again, I'm not naive to think it's not a business. You have to do what's best for the business of the football team. I think he's still around come the summer. I think the Bills want to see how his recovery goes. I know that there's some save potential there, but I think that my gut is saying that he's still
Mhm.
going to be around this team come training camp 2024, and I don't know that that means he's going to even play honestly in
Yeah.
2024. But I think the Bills, they're not in such a dire straits with the cornerback position that they have to like get rid of
Mhm.
Trey to bring someone else in, right? They can, if they want to, they can draft a corner. They can draft a
Yeah.
corner. They can sign. They can try to re-sign Dane Jackson, right? And they can try
Mhm.
to have Dane Jackson, Elam, Benford, and Rasul Douglas. Like, and that's fine. Like, you can get
Yep.
by with that. And in fact, that's more than getting by. That's
Yeah.
a really nice group. So the Bills are in a position, depending on if they are able to bring back a guy like Dane Jackson, let's say, and even if they don't, they still have three boundary guys that they can feel pretty comfortable going into the season with and seeing sort of how it plays out with Trey's recovery. So I'd expect him to still be on the
Yeah.
team.
And Aaron Quinn painted a pretty fun picture of like what the Buffalo Bills could do if Trey White ever got himself back healthy, right? You have Trey White on one side, you have Rasul Douglas on the other, and then that Taylor Rapp role, sort of that like thick dime. You can move Christian Benford into that that spot, right? And you could start running dime packages with Christian Benford, who's a pretty physical, aggressive corner going all over the field. So, or you could transition Christian Benford to a safety role, which is something that in the pre-draft process was talked about because of his ball hawking skills. So some interesting things you could do with Christian Benford if Tre'Davious White finds his way back onto the football field. But Either way, look for the Buffalo Bills to extend Rasul Douglas. He's 1 year, $9 million contract because he was traded. None of it is guaranteed. So he's like a $9.5 million cap hit, but all of that money is saved if you release him because all of his guarantees stuck with Green Bay when he got traded. So $9 million is a lot for a team up against the cap, especially a team that's already paying Tre'Davious White. So Rasul Douglas is probably going to have to get an extension to lower that cap hit. So I really wouldn't expect a lot of investment from the Buffalo Bills at corner outside of day 3 draft picks and maybe a couple of bargain like Cam Dantzler type of, free agent additions.
Do you think there's a chance they bring back Dane Jackson? I think there's an okay chance, maybe.
Yeah, it depends on his market, right? Like, I mean, I don't even know if they'd be willing to pay him like what Levi Wallace got paid by Pittsburgh, like what 2 years, like $6 million or whatever. Well, like
I'd bring him back. I'd bring him back for $2 to $3 million a year. I mean, I would if they could make it work.
Can they afford it though? That's the question. Like they did it this year and it was still pretty, they were pretty tight up against it. So you got to figure if Tre'Davious White comes back, Rasul Douglas, Kyer Elam, Christian Benford, he's now the 5th cornerback, right? Like is he even active on game day? Is Kyer Elam active on game day? So it's just a numbers game and it's really tricky. But I mean, if you can get him back for cheap, do it. Like I love Dame Jackson as a depth player.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to talk about before we move on to safeties is I do have a little bit of hope for Kyer Elam heading into 2024. Bobby Babich, Jamil Adai, the new cornerbacks coach with John Butler out. Everything that Eric has been sort of posting on social media about Bobby Babich's background, who he's worked with, Adai's background, and he's worked with. But maybe we see a little bit more cover one, a little bit more press man this year. And that's getting some of those elements mixed in could help maybe Kyer Elam find some consistency. So again, it was tough to watch a guy like Trent McDuffie ball out last night, knowing that Kansas City jumped us. Who knows if the Buffalo Bills would have even drafted Trent McDuffie because he's more of a nickel corner. But Kyer Elam has had a rough go for the past 2 years, but maybe he could find himself with some new coaches here on the Buffalo Bills defense.
Yeah, maybe. And Chris comes in with a super chat. Thank you, Chris, as always. I maybe in the wonder with kind of like Jamarcus Ingram's career trajectory. I could see him becoming the next Cam Lewis for this team. Yeah. And I think that there's a decent chance Jamarcus Ingram, competes in camp. Maybe makes that a tougher decision for the Bills. But I just obviously with Dane Jackson not back in the mix, like let's say presume he's gone, then there's a chance he could make the team.
I think he's one of the dark horses, sleepers, right, to make this team because he's another guy that the Buffalo Bills have been grooming for a number of years now, just like they groomed Cam Lewis for a number of years, Kingsley Jonathan, Alec Anderson, etc. So he's been through that Buffalo Bills sort of development trajectory. I'm going to be really interested to see where he lines up in training camp, where he lines up in the preseason. Because I think if he needs to make the roster, I think he's a good boundary corner with his size and speed. I think he's a good special teamer with his size and speed. Can he play nickel? Can he play safety? If he can make himself diverse in that way, I think he's got a lot better chance of making the roster. So thank you, Chris, for that super chat. I always appreciate super chats. I always appreciate your comments as well, Chris. Speaking of versatility, onto the safety position, the Buffalo Bills have under contract heading into next season Jordan Poyer, DeMar Hamlin, and someone named Kendall Williamson. They signed to a futures deal. Pending UFAs include Micah Hyde, who said he is contemplating retirement, Taylor Rapp, and Cam Lewis. Contract to note, Jordan Poyer, if he is released, it is $5.5 million cap savings and a $2 million dead cap hit. To me, Micah Hyde retiring or possibly retiring, either way, his contract is up, and Taylor Rapp leaving. This is a major need for the Buffalo Bills and Sean McDermott, considering how important safety is to their defense, how important it is that the safeties be split safeties. So you need a particular kind of safety. I have it as a major need. Where do you have it, Dave?
It's major. And I, it was major enough for me to start looking at some free agent options today. I like Alohi Gilman from the Chargers as a potential free agent signing. I was talking to Nate Geary about him in Twitter DMs earlier about, obviously he's a Notre Dame guy. So he was giving me a little intel on him. I like him as a possible option, but it's a major need, right? I mean, like you've got almost an entire, the entire group is a question mark, right? Hyde's gone. Poyer, is he going to be back around? I think you probably, if you think you can get some decent play from Poyer, you probably need to have him back for 2024, right? Because it's just going to be too insurmountable, I think, to try to overhaul this entire group. And I don't think you are going to feel great about going into the season with just Damar Hamlin and then whatever you do in free agency, right? So I think Claude's right. You got to keep Poyer. You sign someone, draft someone. It might be finally time for the Bills to hit safety in the draft and hit it with a decently high draft pick, depending on how the board falls. But man, I think, I do think Poyer, I think he's got to be back for 2024 if he wants to play.
Yeah, I think that's your first decision, right? I think your first decision is Jordan Poyer versus Taylor Rapp. If you want to stay older, you want to stay with the veteran, you want to stay with the guy who's been established here, I think you just don't re-sign Taylor Rapp and you just go one more year with Jordan Poyer. I don't think you ask him to renegotiate. I don't think the Bills and Jordan Poyer have that kind of relationship anymore. I think you're just going to have to keep the contract as is. Maybe you can guarantee some money and add some void years to lower the cap hit. Maybe he will be game to do something like that. But I think you just got to pick one strong safety. So whether it's Jordan Poyer or it's cutting Jordan Poyer, saving that $5.5 million, and then maybe bringing Taylor Rapp back on a smaller end deal to be your strong safety. I don't think you can let two safeties walk out the door, Hyde and Poyer, without at least someone with some type of familiarity with your scheme, like a Taylor Rapp here to step in. And who knows, maybe the Bills do want to go younger, so they go with Taylor Rapp at strong safety and then bring in a free safety. Either way, the Buffalo Bills are looking to add a free safety and they're looking to fill depth. Like, I'm sort of joking here, but I have in my notes, I think that one of Jeremy Chin, Cam Kinchins, Tyler Nubin, or Cole Bishop needs to be a Buffalo Bill. Like, one of those four dudes needs to be
Cole
a Buffalo
Bishop.
Bill.
He just seems to fit, man.
I'm team Tyler Nubin. I know you're team Cole Bishop. We might already be picking sides for our no matter what, but
different. Those are different caliber guys, though, right? Like if you want a round one, round two guy, sure. Round one, really. Nubin's probably could be round one, right? So yeah, Cole Bishop probably more of a like late day two, maybe even day three, early day three. But yeah, I just like him.
I think Cam Lewis is an easy re-sign, right? But even so, like, you're looking to double dip if you're the Buffalo Bills. I think there's a chance that Cam Lewis could be competing for the starting free safety job, right? So if he re-signs back, you need bodies, you need competition. The Buffalo Bills need bodies and competition at the safety position as they look to reset that position. All right, let's close this out with special teams, right? Tyler Bass, Sam Martin, Reed Ferguson, all under contract. To me, it is a minor need. No, you're not getting out of Tyler Bass's contract. Hate to break it to you. It's another one like Dawson Knox. That's a little harder to get out to until at least 2025. Sam Martin was the AFC Special Teams Player of the Month to end the year before he got hurt in the playoffs, so he started to recalibrate. Maybe the Buffalo Bills bring in some camp legs at kicker and punter this year to rest and push and just sort of bring Tyler Bass and Sam Martin down to earth a little bit. But in my opinion, the Buffalo Bills special teams unit probably gets rolled back. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Sam Martin's a cut candidate, right? I mean,
really? Okay.
Yeah. I think
we have bigger fish to fry, man. I just think we have bigger fish to fry.
No, that's fair. You do save $1.35 million though if you cut him, but then again, like, you're going to still have to sign a punter. So what kind of real savings are you going to get? So yeah, you might be right. I know it seems more likely than not that I would probably have to agree with you that they're going to run it.
And I'll tell you what too. And we joke about it on this show all the time, but you watched that Super Bowl last night. You saw how important defense was. You saw how important special teams was, and special teams is more than just kickers and punters. No Matthew Smiley firing has been announced by the Buffalo Bills. They're running it back, it appears, with Matthew Smiley. The Bills, I think, are banking on Matthew Smiley being able to return the special teams to the form he had them at 2 seasons ago, right? When they were one of the better special teams units. And I think that is going to involve the Buffalo Bills bringing in some special teams specific players. So when we're looking at free agents this offseason in the next couple of weeks, when we're looking at draft picks, especially day 3 guys over the next couple of weeks and months, I think you're going to have to make sure that they tick the special teams box, because I think that's going to be something that's very important to the Buffalo Bills this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, and as much as it has pained us over the years to pay these special teams only guys, I mean, if the Bills special teams was bad last year, and so I don't know if that means like I hope it doesn't mean paying like a sixth linebacker $2 million, $3 million a year. The Bills, I don't think realistically can do that. If we invest limited resources on like a sixth linebacker that plays special teams, I would be pretty upset with that. Now, other areas, bring in a punter for competition, bring it whatever, then fine. But you're right. Like we saw what happened last night. It's huge. It's important, but also the Bills have to be smart with their money. So it'll be interesting to see. They have options, but yeah, I would agree with you when you start looking at free agency. You know, some of these guys we need to look at whether or not they play special teams.
All right, on to our final thoughts for this evening, and I want to sort of sum it all up here. I think having gone through this deconstruction of the roster from top to bottom, quarterback all the way through special teams, it's become pretty evidently clear the Buffalo Bills have 4 major position groups that they need to rejuvenate and recalibrate this offseason: wide receiver, edge rusher, interior defensive line, and safety. So I'm asking you first here, Dave, for your personal power rankings, what you would do, how you would go about ranking these 4 needs: wide receiver, edge rusher, IDL, safety. Comment section, hit us up with how you would rank them as well in terms of addressing these positions and the resources you're going in. How would you power rank our needs right now? Bills are electric already coming in saying D tackle, D end, wide receiver, and then safety. What are your thoughts?
Bills are electric, and I've been kind of on the same page most of the night here, and so I think I'm going to have to agree with him there. I think D line. I don't care what order you put it in. I think D line to me is probably the number one priority. I mean, just from a pure body standpoint, you have almost nothing, right? You have barely a starting. Like you barely have your starting edges, right? You have a limping Von Miller and Greg Rousseau. You have one starting defensive tackle right now, and Ed Oliver technically, because you don't have Daquan Jones back technically yet, and Eli Anku, I guess, would be the de facto guy. D-line, right, is number one. I think I'll put wide receiver number 2. I almost want to put safety above wide receiver, but I just think it's such a I don't know. Is it becoming more of a premium position? Are we coming full circle on safety? Is it becoming more important?
I feel like you can find bargain bin guys. Like, I mean, the Chiefs were rolling out like Mike Edwards and like having success. So
for those reasons, I'm putting wide receiver above safety, and I'll put safety last. Although I do think safety is a concern. Don't get me wrong. From a level of talent perspective, we need safety more than we need receiver, but I think receiver is more of premium. So I'll go with receiver first.
TP comes in and says defensive tackle, wide receiver, safety, and defensive end.
Defensive end last is bold.
I know, and I think it's a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's so much money tied up there already with Von Miller. And this is tough, right? Because it's the personal one. And I'm team, I want a wide receiver so bad. But when you deconstruct this roster and you look at this roster, it's got to be defense. To me, it's defensive tackle first, because I believe in building inside out. I believe it's wide receiver second. I'm going to go defensive end third. And then I'm going to go safety fourth. So I'm going to go with Chris Jenke here. So me and Chris are on sort of the same page here. I might even flip safety and defensive end and make safety 3, defensive end 4, but somewhere along those lines. Give me interior defenders, give me wide receivers. We had this conversation at the top of the show, so it's kind of bringing it full circle. Try your best to go out and get yourself a Chris Jones or a Reek Armstead. I know it's difficult. I'm speaking in hyperbolics here. Go find yourself a Brandon Ayuk. That should be the goal, right? Draft a guy in the first or the second round at wide receiver who can turn into Brandon Ayuk. Draft a guy in the first or the second round at defensive tackle who you can develop into I'm not gonna say those 2 names again because that's just wrong. But go find an imposing interior defender to put next to Ed Oliver, right? In the first two rounds of the draft. That's, I think, as the Buffalo Bills, that's gotta be your goal. is interior pressure, wide receiver, and then from there, safety edge rusher. And then from there, just fill holes on day 3. We just spoke about what we personally believe. Let's close out with what we think Brandon Beane believes. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the Buffalo Bills GM. I put a poll out there on Twitter today. If you were Brandon Beane, or not if you were Brandon Beane, that's not how I phrased it, because that's not the response I wanted. Essentially said, put yourself in Brandon Beane's shoes. Project how Brandon Beane would rank these 4. Over 1,000 votes, which is pretty good for our poll. 54% wide receiver, 24% IDL, 12% edge, 10% safety. So it went wide receiver, interior defender, edge, safety in the rankings. I'll tell you what, I think people are letting personal biases get in the way, because I think if you're Brandon Beane, it's probably the defensive line.
Wouldn't be surprised if edge is his number 1, honestly, the way it's gone for him.
Yeah.
The opposite of your
that's what happens when you miss on Boogie Basham, because Boogie Basham should still be here. He should still be affecting the quarter. Like Boogie Basham, if he hit on Boogie Basham, we're not as worried right now, right? Like we're not. So it's what happens when you don't hit on your day 2 picks there. But it also shows why Brandon Beane took Boogie Basham when he did, because he probably foresaw a scenario like this and wanted a body to move in, but just didn't hit on the pick, which was unfortunate. All right, ladies and gentlemen, next week we'll be back Monday at 9 p.m. dipping our toes into the free agent pool. We're going to try to isolate some players at every position group that the Buffalo Bills may target. So I'm looking forward to that one. And then some upcoming shows the week after. It's on to the combine, baby. We're going to have our preview show. You're going to have us breaking down all the position groups and players we look forward to seeing in Indy. And then we'll have our reaction show. And the reaction show is fun because the rumor mill starts flowing in Indy as well. So we'll have some hot stove rumors. We'll have players testing scores. We'll have all the scuttlebutt from Indy as well. And we might have some boots on the ground in Indy. We're going to have some Cover One representatives in Indy this year as well. So we might bring John Hellkamp back onto the show as well to talk about the combine if he can get there. And if not, we'll probably still bring him on because I love talking to that guy and the perspective he brings. And he'll be following the combine closely, whether he is there or not. So I'm really excited about these shows that we have coming up the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's, once you get over the wounds of the season being over, this is where we hit our stride. These months between February and May, I think are our sweet spot for us. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to refocusing a bit on that type of stuff and kind of getting out of the week to week grind of the pre-games and the reaction shows. Which, look, that's the season. There's nothing like it. But to kind of change course here a bit over the next few weeks, it's going to be fun to talk about. And there's a lot to talk about for this team.
It's always fun to put your Brandon Beane cap on and get to pretend to be Brandon Beane and predict what's going to happen, only for him to not do anything you say, make you look foolish, and then have to take back everything you say and react to what the Buffalo Bills actually do. I had this so I post mock drafts. Every year I'm like, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. And I do it. I have a problem. I have an addiction. I have an addiction to mock draft simulators. I'm not going to apologize for it. But every year, I'll post mocks and people will be like, how dare you not draft this position in this round? How dare you not draft this position? How dare you walk out of this draft without, people yelling at me, right? And they'll just be ripping on these mock drafts. If a time machine is ever built, right? And we can time machine to April 25th. April 26th, and you just screenshot the Buffalo Bills draft and then go back to present day in February and post that as a mock draft, fans would eviscerate it. But then on draft day, when it happens, fans are excited. They love it. Brandon Beane made great picks. It's wild, man. It's absolutely wild. If you went in February and posted Kyer Elam, James Cook, Terrell Bernard, 1, 2, 3, fans would have lost their shit. They would have called you dumb. They would have called you names. And obviously, maybe with one of those picks, it was deserved, Kyer Elam.
That was my single best draft call I've made. I predicted the pick, and it has not worked out.
But you predicted. You didn't want it. You predicted it.
Yes,
but James Cook has panned out, and Terrell Bernard has panned out. So we need a FO. And if we went back and we would have posted a mock draft with Dalton Kincaid followed by Osiris Torrance, everyone would have been like, oh, it's so unrealistic. There's no way Dalton Kincaid's going to fall to the Bills pick. There's no way Osiris Torrance is going to fall to the second round. You're an idiot. Oh, like, that's what I'm like. So we got to take a deep breath. I don't know if we're going to do, I don't know how mock drafty we're going to get on this. Well, we're still going to do it. Who am I kidding? We're still going to do the mock drafts on this show. But just remember that when the draft rolls around, screenshot the Bills draft when it's all said and done. Look at the Bills draft and think to yourself, how would have I reacted to that in February? Like, because it's kind of funny. Because I guarantee you, if you're honest with yourself, you probably would not have liked it if someone would have posted that as a mock draft in February. All right, ladies and gentlemen, keep an eye out this week on Cover One. Thursday is the salary cap extravaganza. Are you partaking in the salary cap extravaganza?
Yep.
So you will be partaking. You'll be representing the Air Raid Hour on the salary cap extravaganza. You, Greg Tomsett, Aaron Quinn, Anthony Prohaska, a whole bunch of other Cover One personalities. You guys will be going player by player. You'll be breaking down the cap casualties, the restructures, the re-signing. You'll be doing the job of Brandon Beane to try to free up the salary cap space that the Buffalo Bills can play with. So tune in Thursday night, probably around 9 p.m. Keep an eye out for that notification from Cover One. The salary cap extravaganza is this week. And also, guys, if you love draft content, if you love talking draft picks, if you love watching videos on draft picks, head on over to Cover One College Football and subscribe to the newest Cover One channel. It's Cover One College Football. It's a completely different channel. They got about 2.5K subscribers right now. John Helmkamp, Daniel Harms, they do a great job with the Cover One Draft Weekly podcast. Eric Turner is going to be posting prospect film breakdowns on this channel. There's going to be a whole bunch of draft related and college football related content. So if you are a fan of college football, head on over to Cover One College Football and subscribe to that station. You will not regret it. All right, Dave, any final thoughts before we head out of here this evening?
No, I got to get my prep on for the Thursday salary cap show. So got to make sure I
Good
do
luck.
that.
I politely declined. I said, I don't have the brain power to be trying to do a show like that. I got a newborn to take care of. I got a job. I got a coach. I'm just like, no, I'm going to leave that up to the people smarter than me. So that would be you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, tune in on Thursday night for the Cover One extravaganza. Smash that like before you head out of here. If you think that there is someone who would enjoy this podcast, this show, whether it's in audio form or this video form, just click that little share button at the bottom, copy and paste the link, text it to them, email it to them. Word of mouth is the number one way to spread a show like this and to get people turned on to the Air Raid Hour. And we always appreciate that. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. I know Dave appreciates it. Until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!